Smoke fills the air, the wrestlers roar. It's smoke beyond the mat, where legends go to war. From the ring to the mic, the stories unfold of triumphs and tears, tales yet untold. Smoke beyond the mat, where legends are born, where the passion burns bright and the spirit is torn. From the heart of the ring to the soul of the show, smoke beyond the mat, where the wrestlers go. Take the stage with wit and charm. They guide us through the chaos, keeping us warm. From old school icons to rising stars, they share their journeys, leaving lasting scars. Smoke beyond the mat, where legends are born, where the passion burns bright and the spirit is torn. From the heart of the the soul of the show, smoke beyond the mat, where the wrestlers go.
Howdy.
And here we are, Grump, with another edition of course, Smoke Beyond the Mat. And tonight we're going to be doing the Hall of Famer and living legend, that is Jake the Snake Roberts, or for anyone else who knows, of course, Jake the Snake Roberts, real name, of course, Aurelian Smith Jr., and born in May 30th, 1955. And, of course, Aurelian Smith goes by the name now of Jake the Snake Roberts. And, of course, I did get the picture from old Wikipedia. I did. So thank you to Wikipedia for the picture. But yeah, living legend Jake the Snake Roberts. And what a life he's led, Grump. And I got to know who Jake the Snake Roberts was in the late 80s. So 89 to 90s, I knew who Jake the Snake was. And saw him on TV with one of the biggest segments to ever get shut down on American TV and also English TV, when he set the King Cobra on Macho Man Randy Savage, and that snake was mauling Macho Randy Savage's arm. And to then see where he came back in Stone Cold Steve Austin and different things, and how his life then, of course, led to where he is now, and that is, of course, clean and sober, and living his life like he should be, and celebrating his life like he should be. But of course, when did you get to know about Jake the Snake Roberts, Grump? What year was it when you very first saw the guy come on the scene, and what did you think when you saw him?
Oh man, it was probably early 80s.
Yeah.
I didn't look see what. I mean, it was the Georgia Championship Wrestling Circuit.
Yep.
You know, out of the guys out of Atlanta. That I'm pretty sure best of my old memory. I think that's about where Jake come in.
Yep, it was
Georgia Championship Wrestling in the early 80s.
Yeah, of course, Jake is a national. Basically, lives in Georgia, in America. He does, and he always hailed from, of course, Georgia. And like we know, of course, he's been a wrestler, and what he's doing now at the moment with his career, he's in AEW, where he's a manager for, of course, a Spanish tag team. And he was in, of course, WWE, and he signed under a Legends contract. So this is why, of course, we see the likenesses of Jake on TV and different things. But when he was born on May 30th, 1955, He was born in Gainesville, Texas, USA. And of course, as we know, he wrestled in the World Wrestling Federation, so WWF. And that was in between 1978, 1986, 1992. And then, of course, his second time was 1996 and 1997. He also wrestled in the National Wrestling Alliance in 1983, World Championship Wrestling in 1992, which of course is WCW, and the Mexican-based places, of course, which was 1993 to 94. He also showed up in Extreme Championship Wrestling, which is ECW, and that was in summer of 97, and then made appearances on Total Nonstop Action Wrestling from 2006 till 2008. But throughout his career, he's done some really crazy shit, as we know. And I've always said this, even just with how Jake was, he's a master of the mic. He was a master of the mic. To see somebody carry a python, a regulated python, down to the ring, and then to see, of course, that slickness in the ring, how he did the short arm clothesline to the DDT and how he invented the DDT. And he called it DDT after the rat poison in the United States. DDT. What a name for a wrestling move. Well, I've got to say one thing, Grump. When he used that DDT, they didn't get up. They were down for the count. Now, look at modern day wrestling. They'll lead into a DDT, and the person gets up. It's not classed as a finisher anymore. And Jake was one of a kind to do that move, and they never got up. And like we say, fantastic career when we start getting into it. And like we say, of course, he was known for being an iconic figure anyway. And his intensity, the cerebral programs, of course, the dark characterism around him, extensive use of psychology in his matches. And of course, like I just said, the innovator of the DDT, which was later named the coolest maneuver of all time by WWE. Of course, he often brought snakes into the ring, most famously a python. And his pythons had some names. So, of course, we had Damien, which was one of them. Then we had Revelations, which was another one. And he also had another snake, and that was called Lucifer. And that was Damien's big older brother, was Lucifer. That was a nasty bastard. And he also had the King Cobra, just to name a few snakes that he brought down to the ring.
Yeah.
But as we know, Jake's life did take a dark turn. And a lot of it was shown, of course, in a film called Beyond the Mat in 1999, which showed, of course, Jake's drug taking, his drinking, and also the lead to, of course, his family breaking up and different things. But in 2012, he moved in with fellow wrestler, of course, DDP. Seeked out for getting his life back on track following years of alcohol and drug addiction. The period covered in the 2015 documentary, The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. And then Jake was, of course, also inducted in 2014 into the WWE Hall of Fame. And now, of course, he's in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum, and that was in 2020. But in Jake's earlier life, he had a really hard upbringing. And, of course, he's also been married 3 times. And he's been married to Karen, which was from 1974 to 1986. He then met, of course, Cheryl in 1990 until 1998. And then he married again, which was Jude from 2006 to 2020. He's got 8 children. His relatives, of course, are Grizzly Smith, which is his father. He's got a half-brother, that's Sam Houston, which, of course, ex-wrestler as well. Rockin' Robin, which is his half sister, who, of course, also wrestled. Baby Doll, which, of course, is another. And then, of course, James Smith and Tommy Smith. And he's had some fair names. He had Al DeLabro, Fred Platt, Jake the Snake Roberts, Jake Smith Jr., the Snake, and the Texan. And he was billed is 6'4" and weighed 249 pounds, and basically came from the Stone Mountain, Georgia, and was trained by Buck
Yeah.
Robley and Moose Muraski, and he debuted in 1975 and retired in 2018. But did you ever see,
Yep.
when, of course, you were watching Georgia Grump, did you ever see Grizzly Smith, his father, wrestle? Did you ever see Jake's father wrestle?
I cannot honestly say that I have. I mean, if I have, it was I didn't know the connection or whatever, but I
Yep.
don't remember a Grizzly Smith, in my growing up days,
Yep. That's the
So
thing. You know something I didn't know who he was until, of course, finding out about Jake, seeing more about Jake and different things.
yeah,
But like I say, we'll go on about his early life. So, of course, Aurelian Smith Jr. was born in Gainesville, Texas. His father, of course, Aurelian Grizzly Smith, was born in 1932 to 2010, was his father, also a wrestler. He left his mother when she was 17. So basically, his dad left the mother at 17, which, yeah, we can tell stories on that, but we won't. By which time she'd given birth to another child. So Roberts lived with his grandmother until she died in 1966, which forced him to move back to live with his father and his new wife. Roberts had a strained relationship with his paedophile father and was sexually and physically abused by his stepmother during this period, which included, of course, sex, and his father was also doing the same to his daughters, which, yeah, to his half sisters. He has a half brother called Michael Smith and a half sister called Robin Smith, both of who became wrestlers during the late 1980s, and all three did wrestle in WWF at the same time. How do you think that somebody could cope with that, knowing there's the dad's a paedophile, and then they've been sexually abused by their own stepmother from a young age group?
I can't. I couldn't imagine. I mean, your dad's in the same profession, and of course, like I said, I don't know who he was, but he
Yep.
was obviously somebody in the business. So to know, that people who didn't know what look up to the guy,
Yep.
think he's the
Exactly.
greatest thing on earth, you know, and you know what a slug he is, behind the closed doors,
Oh yeah.
and knowing that you have no help from the partner, she's complicit with it,
Yep.
complacent, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Complacent.
it was a big word. I stumbled, but knowing that you can't go to her,
No,
and
because
then
she's gonna go and tell his dad.
and
Exactly.
yeah, and then if you try to go public, if he's
Yep.
got any weight at all, then they're gonna look at you like you're just a mad kid looking for revenge or looking for a name or whatever.
Yep.
This guy wouldn't do nothing like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, you try to roll all that
It's
through your head, and that and and to be able to go into this business behind your father like that,
oh yeah.
and then be able to do this and not get in there and lose your cool, and everything goes back to maybe a beating you took,
Yep.
as a kid growing up or whatever, and you snap and just go goofy loose on somebody in the ring. I mean, how do you manage that? I mean, we didn't see
Yeah.
that happen with any of them.
No,
But
you know something. It's a weird thing because
yeah, yeah,
Aurelian Smith Senior, which I'm going to say Aurelian Smith Senior, because of
yeah,
course he'd been Jake's father. Aurelian met Jake the Snake's grandmother. While he was dating the grandmother, he was going into, of course, the bedroom that would be Jake the Snake's mum, and basically sexually abused her, and that's how she became pregnant and had Jake. Then you look at him having daughters, as he was doing the same to his daughters. But while all that was going on, Jake's eldest sister started seeing an older man that was divorced, supposedly. The older man wasn't divorced, and what ended up happening was they found evidence to say this Jake's elder sister was dead. And it involved, of course, the married man's wife. And supposedly she was put in a car boot and dumped somewhere, and they never found her. So Jake held that in for his elder sister. But when he was living with his grandparents, he also saw the physical abuse of his grandfather and what his grandfather was doing to himself with alcohol addiction. And of course, seeing his grandfather take the anti-abuse pills, which of course are the ones that are out in the States to stop you from drinking. And then his grandfather just going down to the local five and dime and grabbing a bottle of booze and doing the bottle of booze, even on the anti-abuse. So Jake saw a lot from that young age. And I think this is where we see this leading into that bit of a darker side with some of his promos to lead down to the drug addiction and the alcohol addiction where he went. He probably did that, Grump, to cope with everything that went on.
yeah.
And it's a shame when we look at just that early life, what went on. But of course, let's move away from that and get on about the professional wrestling. So, early in Jake's career, from 1974 to 1986, Robert started his career in Louisiana area as a ref, and a year later made his debut as a wrestler, making his name in Mid-South Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and of course, one that Grumpy watched, Georgia Championship Wrestling. Roberts had trouble developing his character to the late 1970s, and he travelled to Canada to wrestle in Stampede Wrestling, which of course was owned by the Hart family, and Roberts feuded with the Junkyard Dog. So just there coming into it, Grump, he's trying to develop that character, and it must have been hard trying to develop a character around that time. You then go to Canada, where the Hart family is, and Stu Hart being the one to tie you up in a pretzel and twist you up the wrong way.
Yeah.
And if you were none other than the JRD, Junkyard Dog. How do you reckon he was feeling, Grump, going all the way up to Canada? And that's his very first opponent, the Junkyard Dog. Because as we know, the Junkyard Dog, he wasn't built like all the steadheads, all the ones that were on the steroids with them muscle bodies. He was a big bloke. He was built like a brick shithouse that would knock you around and you'd say, "Okay, boss. Yeah, I won't do it again, boss." So how do you think Jake felt going into that and going to Canada and then meeting, of course, the JRD?
Probably one of those what have I got myself into moments.
Like every Tuesday when we do the podcast.
Yeah, kind of who did I really make mad, to deserve this kind of start, I'm sure there was a lot of different scenarios that was going through his head.
Oh yeah, there must have been. I think if that was me and I'd seen the JRD, I would have been, "Oh shit, what the hell have I got myself into? Why have I come to
Yeah.
Canada?" It was in Georgia Championship Wrestling during 1983 that Roberts became part of Paul Ellering's stable. And of course, as we know, with Paul Ellering. He
Yeah.
was the manager for the Legion of Doom and began a feud with Ron Garvin over the NWA World Television Championship that lasted into 1984. In 1984, Roberts entered World Class Championship Wrestling, which was WCCW, and joining up with the gentlemen Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez in their feud against the Von Erichs. To be honest with you, you look at Paul Ellering's stable. I don't want to go too far, but just going over Paul Ellering's stable of what he had. And in that stable, it was crazy. Because you had the likes, of course, of the Legion of Doom, so Orc and Hannibal. You also had the likes of Dusty Rhodes around that time, and different ones. And he had some crazy teams because he also had King Kong Bundy with Jake the Snake Roberts and the Road Warriors. That was the stable that he had in, of course, Georgia Championship Wrestling around the time. But as we know, of course, the Von Erichs and their tragic story, and we're going to be going more into the Von Erichs, and we're going to do a full show on the Von Erichs. We are. But they won, of course, the WCCW television title, and he also won a 6-man tag team title with Adams and Hernandez. Robert then returned to Mid-South Wrestling in 1985 and ended his run there in February of 1986 with a feud with Dick Slater after being told by management that he was not considered a top talent even though he was getting the biggest crowd reactions.
Yeah.
How do you think he must have felt being told you're never going to make no money, you're not a top attraction, you're always going to be a mid-carder? What do you think he felt about that, Grump?
Well, I mean, I'm long out of my sports playing and stuff, but I mean, all through school, I played ball and all.
Yeah.
So the way I would have looked at that, sometimes in the sports world, that kind of negativity is actually a test. It's actually to see, is somebody going to bully you out? Is somebody going to make you mad or hurt your feelings or make you take your ball and go home, just by talking about you? Or are you going to prove them wrong? Or are you going to show them they don't know what they're talking about? See, I mean,
Exactly.
some people use that as a motivation, and other people use it to bully you out of something. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we see, and yes, his career, did go through some dark periods and dark times.
Yeah.
But we can also see that because he didn't give up, because he didn't just throw his hands up and walk away from it, we see the progression and we see where it all went,
Yeah.
And he didn't let them bully him out, and he didn't go away and cry in a corner when somebody told him that he wasn't good enough.
I find it weird because as we get a little bit further in, and the Undertaker.
Yeah.
The Undertaker was also told in WCW, you're too big, you'll never make no money. To us, you just look like a basket player playing wrestling because you are a ginger basketball player. So you look, Jake was told, you'll never do anything in wrestling. Undertaker, you'll never do anything in wrestling.
Yeah.
Two Hall of Famers in wrestling. Two Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
And it could have stopped Jake there and gone, you know what? Yeah, okay, it's not for me. But Jake wanted to continue to basically turn around and say to his father, fuck you. And that was what it was. It was basically a big fuck you to his father, because Jake could have had a career in architecture. He'd passed all of his qualifications to be an architect. And Jake wanted to make his father proud. So he became a wrestler. And that's why Jake did it. But what do you reckon in just that short period, though, Grump, from being in Georgia, being with Paul Halloran, King Kong Bundy, in the Legion of Doom, to then going over to WCCW and then feuding with the Von Erichs? What do you reckon about that and the kinds of people that he was teaming with to then fighting against when he moved to another territory? What do you reckon of that?
How after he left all of that crew,
Yeah.
how much more time in his active career, did he spend, with a manager or under management or in a group or anything? Very little, right?
Very little, unless it was Survivor Series, and he had to team up in the old traditional Survivor Series with other members of the wrestling.
All right. And we know that he's done, we know that he done just fine. Even after working through the bad times and all that,
Mm-hmm.
he pretty much came out on top of the pile in the end.
Yep.
So my opinion of that is the time that he was spending with Ellering and the likes of those guys, and hanging out.
Yep.
I think he was paying attention to the marketing, to the
Yep.
promotion, to how to promote, the proper marketing. Because once he left those people, he didn't really ever seem to struggle promoting himself.
So really,
He was always good with the promos.
yeah. So you're saying like learning his craft, aren't you? Learning his craft and getting down to
Yeah,
how to
biding his
cut a
time.
promo, how to be himself. And
Yeah,
that's a great analogy there, what you just used there, Grump. So of course, as we know, Jake then went over and he joined the World Wrestling Federation, which is now, of course, WWE. And that was 1986 to 1992. So he debuted, and then his champion pursuits, which, of course, when he debuted, it was 1986, and looking at trying to get a championship in 1990. Roberts debuted in March 8th of 1986. And what a place to debut, Boston Garden, defeating Joey Louis Riviera. A month later, he made his pay-per-view debut, defeating George Walls at WrestleMania 2. During that match, Robert made Walls foam from the mouth when he wrapped the snake Damien around Walls' head. So, just there before we move on. So, you're told you're never going to be nothing in wrestling. You're never going to make it.
yeah.
To come in, and he's in WrestleMania 2.
Yeah.
What a great big fuck you to WCCW when you've just been in WrestleMania in it.
Yeah.
Holy jeez.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And of course, brought out the snake for the very first time around that time as well. Because Jake, when he was in the other promotions, he didn't use the snake. He'd be wrestling. And this is where Jake kind of changed his image as well. Because when he was wrestling in WCCW and also in Georgia, he'd wear the karate pants. When you saw him move over into WWF, he was wearing the spandex tights with the snake design on it, the snake
Yeah.
boots. So he really changed how his image was. Of course, he's got longer hair as he was coming into that faded mullet kind of hairstyle. So he got a new look. But Roberts' first major feud was with none other than Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And it began a national television episode of Saturday Night's Main Event in May 1986. Roberts executed a DDT on Steamboat on the exposed concrete floor, right in front of Steamboat's wife, Bonnie, and then proceeded to rest the snake Damien on top of a prone Steamboat. While Vince McMahon and Booker George Scott were adamant about wanting the DDT to take place on the floor, Roberts initially refused until Steamboat told him that he would be able to protect himself from the injury. Unfortunately, Steamboat was unable to stop his head from hitting the concrete floor and was rendered unconscious, sustaining a concussion. After Steamboat's recovery, Steamboat introduced a Komodo dragon, which is supposed to have been a dragon for the dragon Steamboat, as his pet to combat the psychological efforts of Robert's snake. The feud continued with Steamboat winning most of the matches, only losing one because he threw Jake back in the ring before the 10 count, while not beating the 10 count himself. But notably, a snake pit match, which was a no DQ match at the big event in Toronto. And then they had also another rematch on October 1986 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event. So you could have just killed one of the main stars by dropping his head on a slab of concrete floor with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that clip, Grump? How he just goes. It's only he gets his head and bang straight down, and you see his head go whoosh, straight in the concrete.
Yeah.
It was crazy, but to see the styles of wrestling between Jake and Ricky, it was a brilliant match. Two great wrestlers, and they're also personal friends as well. And Jake was always about protecting people. He didn't want to hurt nobody, and this is why, of course, he said to Ricky, "I don't want to do it," but Ricky goes, "No, we've got to do it." So that takes a lot when you want to protect somebody and not do that move.
Yeah.
And that led to a great match when you think about it with Ricky and, of course, Jake, because it kind of showed you that Jake could hang with the big stars. Because as we know, with Ricky, he was a big star anyway in some of the federations that he was in, and to come into, of course, WWF at the time, and we'll also do a show about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat because Ricky was a great wrestler. So after, of course, all that, they were recognising his mic skills. So Robert was given his own talk segment, which was called the Snake Pit, which debuted on the first episode of WWF Wrestling Challenge in late 1986. The Snake Pit was patterned after Piper's Pit, wherein Roberts would conduct interviews with wrestlers or managers to help push wrestlers and get feuds over with the crowd. The segment eventually moved to WWF Superstars of Wrestling to replace Piper's Pit after Roddy Piper retired following WrestleMania 3. Until the final segment aired in July 1987, which I was one when he, of course, finished the segment of it. But I remember some of the Snake Pit really well from watching archive videos, and he had some great guests on. There was one video where Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan was feuding with someone. And basically, Mr. Fuji's there with this guy. And he spits the green mist all in Hogan's eyes. And Hogan's rolling around. Oh, my eyes. And Jake's there. Get the medical stuff. Get the medical stuff. But he had some really interesting guests. And the Snake Pit was notable for one feud. And it was the infamous guitar hit. The Honky Tonk Man with, of course, Jimmy Hart, and they smacked the guitar over Jake the Snake's head, which led into their feud. And this is why the Snake Pit always sticks out to me. We're up on that one. So, of course, in 1986, Roberts begun to enjoy an upsurge in fan popularity. Despite the WWF's attempts to cut him in as an unpopular villain, in November 1986, Robert challenged Randy Savage for the Intercontinental Championship. Before the match, announcer Vince McMahon said the fans would probably support Savage against the disliked Roberts. However, to surprise the both McMahon and Fowler broadcaster Jesse the Body Ventura, the fans cheered loudly for Roberts throughout the bout. The match ended in a double disqualification. Around the same time, the WWF also tried to set Roberts up as a nemesis to then fan favourite and WWF World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan and challenged him for the title. However, and this was, of course, what I was telling you last night when we were talking, after Roberts hit Hogan with the DDT during the episode of the Snake Pits, fans responded positive to the attack by chanting DDT rather than Hogan. So McMahon abandoned the plans for a feud between them. Years later, in a 2015 shot interview, Roberts jokingly thanked the fans for ruining what would have been the biggest and most profitable run of my career. At the time, Hogan was the biggest and most popular babyface, and a run against Hogan would have meant main event television and pay-per-view matches. So,
Yeah.
how would you cope with that, Grump? You don't get the Intercontinental title, which is the working man's title, as they've always said. So they don't give you that shot because they're cheering for you. They're not cheering for Macho. They're cheering for you, Jake the Snake. You then go and DDT Hogan, thinking everyone's going to chant for Hogan, but they chant for you. Don't you think that was the biggest setup to fail, going against two of their main big stars? And you're becoming over popular now, and they want you. I think, to me, it's a little bit of shit stabbing going around and a bit of backstabbing and all the rest to do that against your top two. He does it, and it's like, nope, we're scrapping it. We're scrapping it. Well, it still makes the sense to have that match because it's still going to make money. But they didn't. So, what do you think on that one, Grump?
Honestly, I believe it's it's a group of things, actually. I mean, you know, somebody always wants control.
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
always wants to be the one to call the shots.
Vince McMahon.
There you go. And, you know, those kind of people, and that one in particular, will go out of their way to make your life miserable to prove a point.
Yeah.
So if even if fan popularity, if it's going opposite of what they want it to, I mean, they'll turn that around to their advantage. You know, they'll use you and abuse you, and they'll make a whole feud out of it, you know.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be right in there making that money because you're under contract, or you ain't smart enough to see it, whichever. But
Yeah.
they've got their thumb. You see it still today.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look at all
It's
the
still
old
going.
guys that come in today that have the influence they have, to this day.
Yeah. Hulk Hogan, to
Yeah,
name one. Hogan.
yeah, exactly. That was the main one I had on my mind right there. I mean,
Well, we all know what Hulk Hogan is. He's a two-faced, backstabbing son of a bitch. He is, and thinks everybody owes him something because he was Mr. WWF and he made wrestling what it is to this day. And if it wasn't for him and Hulkamania, and yeah, get out your own fucking bubble and get out your own arse. You
those
cocksucker.
people came before him.
Yeah.
Those people came before him that would have tore his poor little self from limb to limb.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Well, of course, that damn feud's died.
Yeah.
Then he started. Then, of course, he had a notable feud, and I think what a great feud as well. When he officially turned face, and he became a baby face, and he feuded with the Honky Tonk Man, which of course was an Elvis impersonator who attacked Roberts with a guitar during the interview segment on the Snake Pit. The Honky Tonk's guitar shot actually injured Roberts' neck. At the time, guitars were not prepared to break easily. The Honky Tonk
Yeah.
Man denies that he purposely injured Roberts, although Honky's manager, Jimmy Hart, as well as a video of the incident seen on Pick Your Poison DVD, which was about Jake the Snake, suggested otherwise, which Roberts later claimed that he was picking pieces of wood out of the back for weeks after. The attack led to their match at WrestleMania 3, in which Roberts had Detroit native Alice Cooper,
Yeah.
a known lover of snakes, by his corner. After Honky Tonk won the Intercontinental Championship from Ricky Steamboat, Roberts successfully challenged him for the championship several times throughout the rest of 1987. The initial plan was for Roberts to win the Intercontinental Championship after the Honky Tonks man win over Steamboat and begin an angle with the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. But because of the injuries from the guitar shot, the decision was made to keep the belt with the Honky Tonk Man. So what do you reckon on that? Honky Tonk Man injuring your
Yeah,
star
that's
with guitar and
what was that? Kind of puts you in mind of them ice skater girls.
yep.
One whacks the other one on the knee. Well, I wasn't really trying to hurt her.
Yep.
I mean, like you said, guitars weren't they weren't props back then.
No.
You can't expect you're gonna whack a dude on the head, with an actual guitar that's not a prop. You're gonna whack him on the head. I mean, and you ain't smart enough to know that's gonna hurt.
Well, Roberts turned around and said from that guitar shot, that's what led him into start taking the painkillers and start going down into the drug addiction route. And the Honky Tonk Man's always been a piece of shit in my eyes. And he's Jerry
I never did
Lawler.
like the dude.
He's Jerry the Lawler's cousin. And Jerry the Lawler, okay, he's a great wrestler, but he's another sack of piece of shit from what he did to Jake. Later on down in, of course, when Jake came back into WWF. But to do that and keep that championship on the Honky Tonk Man that's injured you, I'd be pissed as anything, I would. I'd be in that office going, what bullshit's this you're trying to throw? Did you put me in a match against the bloke that nearly breaks me neck? I beat him, but you still keep the title on him because of this.
Yeah,
What a crock of bullshit. Now, don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
that would
His
be
feud,
upsetting.
his feud with Ted DiBiase was an excellent feud because Jake the Snake Roberts and Ted DiBiase are really good friends, and they met, of course, in Georgia Championship Wrestling and became really strong friends. And they had great chemistry, Grump, when they were wrestling. But after the whole ordeal of that, Roberts then started feuding with Ravishing Rick Rude, and he had his manager at the time, of course, Bobby the Brain Heenan, who began a gimmick of selecting a woman from the crowd to kiss after each match. On April 23rd, 1988, edition of WWF Superstars, sorry, Rude chose Roberts' real-life wife, Cheryl, who refused the kiss and revealed that she was in fact the wife of Jake the Snake. After Rude began insulting Roberts, Cheryl slapped him, angering Rude before Roberts ran out to save. This began a heated feud throughout the summer of 1988 and escalated after Rude began wearing a pair of tights embolizing with Mrs. Roberts' face, and an irate Roberts tore them off. But on a side note of that, Jake the Snake Roberts and Ravishing Rick Rude were also great friends and shared car rides and different things. But how would you have reacted, Grump, if that was someone wearing some tights and they got Mrs. Grumpy's face on them? You'd want to kick the living shit out of them, wouldn't you? So I don't blame
Yeah,
you.
or you're gonna go down trying. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, just like you said, uh, that they were in fact good friends.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you look at that is being able to sell it
Oh
to
yeah.
the crowd,
Oh yeah.
you know, because to watch them in the ring, you know, they're not friends.
No,
Just
they're
like you
enemies.
said, he's standing there with your wife's picture on his crotch.
Yep.
I'm fixing to take his head off his shoulders and, look down his neck and see if there's anything there.
But how do you think
But
it would have? How do you think it would have gone with him and, of course, Cheryl having the conversation? Right, honey, what's going to be happening? I'm going to be wrestling Rick, but Rick's going to wear your face on his tights. I'm going to kick the living shit out of him in the ring and get the win. Bro, you're right with him wearing your face. I can imagine that would have been a difficult conversation to have with his wife and say, by the way, your face is getting on a pair of tights and it's going to be around the bloke's crotch.
well, I don't know, man, because of the time period that it was.
Yeah.
Uh,
80s, we're talking a different kind
a lot of
of
a lot of people
atmosphere.
were it's a different lifestyle, and that was probably one of the better paying forms of entertainment at the time. You
Yeah.
know, and it wasn't like they ain't nobody having sex with nobody. You ain't making no movies.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, things were different back then, but
Yeah.
like I said, they still for the number of friendships that was behind the scenes and all that, they
Oh, yeah.
really did good jobs at selling it in the
Yeah.
arenas and on TV and stuff like that. They did good, and it seemed like the better friends they were, the better they sold it. Really.
Yeah. So Roberts, of course, moved on from that feud with Rude and began one with the Eighth Wonder, Andre the Giant, who
Now,
was also, of course, at the time managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan and the Heenan family. And of course, members that were in there, of course, was Rick Rude. Andre got involved in a match between Rick Rude and Brutus the Barber Beefcake, which, of course, Brutus was friends, of course, with none other than Hulk, and that's how he was brought in. Following that, Roberts came to the ring to help Beefcake, who eventually won by disqualification. Roberts used to snake Damien to scare Andre into eventually a heart attack. Although the feud on the house show circuit saw Andre viciously attack most of those matches, Roberts can claim a victory by disqualification over Andre the Giant, who attacked the special guest referee and his former foe, which was Andre's former foe, Big John Studd, at WrestleMania V. It's funny because Andre didn't like many people, as we know. And Andre would stand on Jake's hair and pull him up. And as he was pulling him up, his hair would rip out. And
Yeah.
Jake always said, Andre, if he didn't want to wrestle with you, Andre would beat the living shit out of you in the ring. He'd slap and paste you all over. Now, if he got on with you, it was going to be easy. But there was a notable thing that Jake said on a podcast once. He was wrestling Andre. Andre went for the big splash and sat down on him. As Andre's sitting, Jake can feel a ripple on his chest. Now, Jake can't breathe because Andre's sitting on him. And Andre's going, and Jake's like, what the hell? I just farted. So Andre farted on Jake. And Jake says on the podcast, he goes, it just sounded, and it went, and it just carried on. He goes, can you imagine a giant fart? He goes, it just
From a
kept going
giant.
and going and going.
Yeah. A giant fart from a giant.
Yeah, giant fart from a giant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a great feud with Andre, and of course, after that, he started feuding them, of course, with Ted DiBiase, another friend of his. Instead of fighting for the Intercontinental Championship, the prize feud was DiBiase's own $1 million championship. It was the first time that Roberts' problems with the discs in his back were publicly acknowledged as DiBiase attacked Roberts after a victory over, of course, DiBiase's bodyguard, Virgil. In the attack, Roberts was a storyline injury by DiBiase that needed time off to have surgery to repair the damage. Roberts returned and feuded with DiBiase throughout the end of 1989 and 1990, and this is when I started seeing more of Jake on WWF wrestling tapes that were given to me by my cousin at the time, so I could see it in different videotapes that I would get in some of the video shops. So, of course,
Right.
Roberts stole DiBiase's belt and put it in his bag with, of course, the snake, daring him or Virgil to reach in the canvas sack where Damien was to retrieve it. The culmination of their feud took place at WrestleMania again IV at the Sky Dome in Toronto, where in the match the $1 million championship was on the line. DiBiase gained a count-out victory over Roberts, those four regaining the non-sanctioned title. After the match, Roberts mounted an offense against DiBiase and Virgil and began giving away DiBiase's money, including giving money to actress Mary Tyler Moore, who was seated at ringside. So, even giving that money away, that was real $100 bills at the time, Grump, given away. It was something to be seen, because even on the promos with the belt, come and reach in and come and get your belt. Trust me. Trust me. Come. Damien's not going to buy you. Come and put your hand in the bag. Trust me. And he'd get you suckered in that much. And Jake would put his hand in the bag and pull out the championship. And he goes, I told you it's in the bag. Trust me. and puts it back in. And it was so great, the feud was. And Jake was one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, to be honest, before I got in with The Undertaker and different ones. But after that feud, I didn't like this feud, to be honest, Grump. I thought this feud was absolute bullshit. But he feuded with Bad News Brown in the summer of 1990.
Yeah.
And they used Myces against the Snake and all the rest. It was a short-lived match. But then he
Yeah.
started feuding with Rick the Model Martel throughout the 1990 to 1991. After Martel kayfabbed blinded Roberts by spraying his cologne arrogance into his eye. Roberts went so far to wear a white contact lens to prove his blindness. After several months, the feud he would meet at WrestleMania V2, in which both contestants were blindfolded. Well, they weren't blindfolded, they had sacks over their heads. Though both Roberts and Martel did not confuse to have some limited vision to the mesh holes in the masks, but they were briefly visible to Jake putting his hand inside the mask after doing it shortly before the start of the match, and the feud ended after Roberts was able to locate Martel and deliver a DDT. So, what do you think of that so far of who he's been wrestling, Grump, overall?
Well, I mean, it's not like, it's not like he's came up with a career, of wrestling nobodies.
No.
I mean, he's always ended up with matches against top talent. He's always had the attention of the crowd, be it good or bad. So I mean,
You gotta look.
I
You gotta
think
look.
he stayed with some pretty good quality, opponents.
You gotta look as well. He's been headlining. Well, not headlining, but he's been a member of the WrestleManias. So he's on that circuit now and getting these big matches.
Yeah.
Feuding at WrestleMania and wrestling with some great superstars and some fellow Hall of Famers as well, because we know the likes of Ricky, Hall of Famer. We know, of course, the likes of Andre, Hall of Famer. The likes of Bobby Heenan, the manager, Hall of Famer, and so forth and so on. But coming down to his final feuds and his departure in 1992. So in mid-1991, and this was notable to me because I absolutely loved this angle, what they did. He started feuding with Earthquake, who squished Damien with a pair of Earthquake splashes during the match on April 27th edition of WWF Superstars of Wrestling. In reality, Robert's bag contained hamburger meat intended to look like a snake with a small mechanical device to the movement. So what they did, they got the hamburger meat, they put it in stockings to look like a snake, and when Earthquake sat on it, the blood came out into the layback sack, and it looked like they killed the snake. So, of course, they tied Jake up in the ropes, so it looked like Jake was upset and all the rest of the snake was dying. And so they carried on the feud. And then, after Earthquake appeared on WWF Primetime Wrestling, and of course, served Quake Burgers to co-host Lord Alfred Hayes and Vince McMahon, later claiming that the meat was grounded from Damien's carcass, which prompted McMahon to angrily knock the burger tray out of Earthquake's hands. Roberts later introduced Snake, being Damien's big brother, Lucifer, and Roberts and Earthquake feuded throughout most of the late spring into the summer, where Roberts defeated Earthquake on July 1st at Madison Square Garden with a DDT, and the match featured Andre the Giant and Roberts' corner. So you look there, Andre being in Roberts' corner after their feud.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing when you look at that feud to be where it is, to have that feud, go against Earthquake, and news has just come out. There's Earthquake and Typhoon are going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame this year in Las Vegas. So well done, of course, to Typhoon. It's a shame, of course, there's Earthquake's not here no more, and he sadly passed. But two great Hall of Famers. I wish him all the luck. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a break for a minute, and then we'll be back. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in a minute.
Let's get ready to rumble.
And we're back. I apologise, but some of us have to give up the Blues Room because we're getting old and we can't hold it. But yeah, so of course, we're talking about none other than Jake the Snake. But in the summer of 1991, this is classed as one of his biggest feuds, if not a bigger one. And it's a shame that it didn't pay off. But in a series of televisual vignettes featuring none other than the Ultimate Warrior turning to Roberts for help with his feud against The Undertaker. In the setup, Roberts explained to Warrior that after passing 3 tests, he would know the knowledge of the dark side to defeat The Undertaker. The segment included Warrior being locked inside a coffin in the funeral parlor hosted by The Undertaker's manager, Paul Bearer. The Warrior being buried alive in dirt after being abandoned, and Warrior then walking through a room full of live snakes to reach the chest containing the answer. During the later segment, the Warrior opened the chest, only to immediately be bitten by a King Cobra, which was actually a rubber prop. As Warrior weakened from the effects of the Cobra's strike, Roberts was joined by The Undertaker and Paul Bearer, revealing the 3 were working together all along. Roberts closed the final segment by proclaiming, "I'm a snake. Never trust a snake." And Roberts turned heel for the first time since 1987. A series of matches were planned, but the feud was cancelled after the Ultimate Warrior was fired by WWF the night of SummerSlam.
Hmm.
So we all know why Ultimate Warrior was fired. He held Vince McMahon up to ransom and wanted more money. And Vince said no. So that was the end of that run with the Ultimate Warrior. Yeah. So that's why Jake was so bitter to Warrior all the way through until Warrior's passing. And at the Hall of Fame, when Roberts was being inducted, the Ultimate Warrior was also being inducted at the same time. Jake is going on record to say that he had a roll of quarters and was going to wrap him up, and he was going to basically take his revenge out on Warrior. Warrior went up to Jake and tapped him on the shoulder and apologized. And Jake got to meet Warrior's daughters and see a different side of the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Hellwig. And sadly, of course, 2 days after WrestleMania, the Ultimate Warrior sadly passed away from a heart attack. And that would be the last time anyone would see him. And Jake went on record and said it was a sad day to see someone pass away like that, especially with his daughters around him at the same time. But Jake went on record about that he held it for so long, about the amount of money and everything, and yeah. But after that feud, Grump, of course, he went on to feud with Macho Randy Savage, and this is, of course, the most memorable thing in a kid's childhood. So, after SummerSlam's wedding reception between Savage and Miss Elizabeth, Elizabeth opened a gift package containing a live cobra. Roberts and The Undertaker attacked Savage until Sid Justice run them off. A short feud between Sid and Sid was scheduled to wrestle El Diablo. The Undertaker came out and accepted the challenge to face Sid. Paul Bearer offered El Diablo, which appeared to be a bribe to walk away. As the match begun, El Diablo came back to the ring and hit Sid. Then the El Diablo unmasked himself as Jake Roberts proceeded to unleash the King Cobra on Sid until Hacksaw Jim Duggan intervened. Sid and Jake wrestled on Superstars a week later, but soon Sid injured his bicep and was forced to end the feud. Roberts initially began berating Randy Savage in a series of promos, aware that Savage, who had lost a retirement match to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania, was unable to extract revenge. On November 23rd edition, WWE Superstars of Wrestling, Roberts goaded Savage into the ring and brutally attacked him, eventually tying Savage into the ropes and got the King Cobra to bite his arm. The snake was devenomized, and according to Roberts' DVD Pick Up Poison, he had trouble getting the Cobra to release the bite. According to Roberts, on the day of the angle was shot, he had to let the King Cobra bite his leg. Savage requested to convince him that the snake had been devenomized, and Savage would regularly check on Roberts to make sure he had no side effects from the bite. This segment went on longer than planned, and Savage's blood could be clearly visible as it dripped from the puncture wounds. Savage stated in a shot interview that his arm swelled and he developed a fever afterwards and had to be checked at hospital. It was also stated that the Cobra died a week after the angle, and he joked that the Cobra must have had Savage's venom from him. Now, what happened? Jake was so pissed with Savage after he had to have him bite his own leg, because when Jake turned to the Cobra, he smacked 7 shakes of shit out the Cobra and pissed the Cobra off. So as he put the Cobra on, it just locked. And as it locked, Jake's pulling on it. And it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Miss Elizabeth came down to the ring and tried to get Jake Gate off. And Jake's going, I can't get off. I can't get off. So Roddy Piper comes down and he goes, get the snake off him. Now, Randy Piper's hiding around Miss Elizabeth because Roddy Piper's scared of snakes. Can't stand them. Well, that ruined Piper's gimmick for being a hard man. But eventually they got the snake off, and of course it went into their feud, and he came out of retirement. But what they, of course, did, Jack Tunney at the time, he was supposed to have been the president and owner of WWF, reinstated Savage as an active wrestler to get attacked for their revenge. The absence of the Cobra, Tunney banned Roberts from ever bringing a snake to the ring again. Savage and Roberts feuded for the next couple of months, and their first match was at this Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view on December 3rd in San Antonio, Texas, which Savage earned a victory over Roberts.
Hang on, buddy.
Yep.
Oh.
And we're back. So, of course, Grumpy had a phone call that he had to take. So we do apologise, but it has technical issues and so forth. But anyway, of course,
We popular people.
Yeah, they brought Savage back, and Savage, of course, was winning. And they had the matches and so forth. And, of course, Roberts couldn't use the snake. They feuded at Royal Rumble in a match for the vacated WWF World Heavyweight Championship. The feud ended on Saturday night's main event, XXX, with Savage getting the win. Roberts lived as having lost to him and having received 2 of Savage's fine elbow drops, one of which after the match, and held backstage. Enraged, he grabbed a steel chair and said that he was going to hit whoever came backstage first, whether it was Savage or Miss Elizabeth. Just as Roberts was about to swing the chair, he was stopped by The Undertaker. Roberts was distracted long enough for Savage to hit him with the chair instead, and the incident helped to set up Roberts' feud with The Undertaker. Roberts stated in a shot interview with Jim Ross that the feud with Savage had to end early because Elizabeth's parents were upset with Savage not protecting Elizabeth with Roberts' kayfabe slapped here. So that was, of course, very popular. But is his feud then started, of course, with The Undertaker? We know Jake was coming to leaving. So they set the match up, of course, with him hitting Barry with a DVT, putting The Undertaker's hand in a coffin and hitting him with a steel chair. The match would happen then at WrestleMania, which Roberts lost and became the second man to lose to The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The match turned out to be Roberts' last for WWF for nearly 4 years. His departure came after he was upset that WWF chairman Vince McMahon did not offer him a position on the writing staff, despite being promised previously after Pat Patterson stepped down from his post on the writing staff from the recent sexual harassment scandal that Pat Patterson was involved in. McMahon decided that out of respect for Patterson, the spot would be left vacant. Roberts felt that he was not only being lied to, but also being betrayed. In response, threatened to no-show WrestleMania if he was not given his release. So, of course, he was given his release and he left. He then went, of course, to WCW, where alongside his father, Grizzly Smith, he aligned himself with the Barbarian and Cactus Jack, and they started feuding against Sting, Nikolai Volkov. It also then went down, there's of course, Frey stepped down and replaced Bill Watts, for whom Roberts had a legit heat with back in the days of Mid-South Wrestling. Ultimately, Roberts estimated that he went from making $3.5 million, which if we look at it now, would have been $8 million a year, to approximately $200,000, which would be $500,000 in a year. So Roberts made, of course, his debut, and he went against none other than, of course, Sting. And what they did, they killed Jake's kind of whole persona and gimmick, so they took the snake away from him, leading into this. And it wasn't memorable. His feuds wasn't great because they did a coal miners match. Coal miners match was so far-fetched. There's no one really got into it. And, of course, they wrestled at Halloween Havoc, and it's supposed to have been the company's top-selling pay-per-view for 7 years, and Roberts soon left WCW. Following the loss to Sting, he continued his feud, facing him on several house shows immediately after the event. And on November 2nd episode of Saturday Night, Tony Schiavone conducted a sit-down interview with Roberts regarding the decision of Bill Watts to ban him from bringing the snake to ringside. And then, of course, he was in a first-round match against Dustin Rhodes in the round of King of Cable tournament, which he was replaced in the tournament by the Barbarian. So, what do you reckon if he's running WCW and taking the snake away from him, feuding him against Sting, and him not getting the money that he was promised by going over? I think, if anything, he should have stayed with WWF and not gone to WCW.
Probably. That I mean, at that point, as many times as he'd been lied to and dumped on, and and everything else, why would you all of a sudden think that things are going to be different this time?
Yeah,
they've been treating you like dirt. They've been treating you like dirt pretty much your entire time being around.
Yeah.
when do you figure out that you're not in the clique, and you got to look out for yourself. You don't have a lot of
It's
friends.
it is crazy. It is crazy. That was the way it went.
Yeah,
Other promotions, and at the time as he went in other promotions, he was wrestling in the American Wrestling Foundation, and he of course got a win over Don Morocco, and he won the heavyweight title on March 4th. Then in April 1993, he toured Europe, particularly Australia and of course Germany. And in September 1993, he took part wrestling tour in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He also then went into Mexican wrestling promotion AAA in 93, causing the defeat of Conan in a Korea versus match. Roberts ran in and of course helped for the defeat. And then Conan defeated Roberts in a hair versus hair match, which Roberts got his long hair cut off and shaved bald. In spring of 1994, Roberts returned to the United States and he wrestled in Smoky Championship Wrestling, which was, of course, Jim Cornette's wrestling.
that's up
And he
there in
defeated
my.
Tony Anthony to win the SMW heavyweight title. And then, of course, that changed. Roberts then came back, as we know, back into, of course, WWF at the time. And this time, Roberts, of course, was a Bible preacher. And he was going along with his new gimmick and his new albino Burmese python that was named Revelations. His gimmick also mirrored his real life, as Roberts was becoming a born-again Christian and he been preaching around the country. During that feud, of course, he feuded with none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that was in the King of the Ring tournament. After, of course, he was injured in his first match of the evening against Vader, and it injured his ribs, which was kayfabe. But to prevent Roberts from sustaining further injuries, they didn't want him, of course, wrestling for too long, so he got defeated by Austin. And in the post-match interview, Austin mocked and recited of the biblical passage John 3:16 by saying, "You sit there and thump your Bible and you say your prayers and it didn't get you anywhere. Talk about your Psalms and talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says, I just whipped your ass." The catchphrase helped propel Austin to the top of WWF and then the Attitude Era. And Roberts did go on record to say this. Basically, he wanted to help Steve Austin. But during the time that he was back in WWE WWF around that time, Jerry the King Lawler would then mock him about his alcoholism. And in 1997, Roberts, to wind down his in-ring career, joined the company's backstage. And he still had a love for wrestling. So while he was still writing, of course, he had to then start wrestling, and he came out more wrestling. But it led to a relapse with drugs and alcohol. He appeared in 1997 Royal Rumble, where he entered at number 7, and of course was over the rope, eliminated by Stone Cold Steve Austin. His last match was on Shotgun Saturdays, and that was against Salvador Sinera in a winning effort. And he was released in March 1997 after not only being deemed too out of shape for WrestleMania, but also being frustrated by the behaviour of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart backstage and part of the creative team that had to mandate the real life backstage bickering. And that was all down to, of course, the screw job. He then went into, of course, ECW, and he had a match between Laura and Tommy Dreamer. He left after a bit, and he went on camera and screamed, "Your God, he's given. He can take it away, my God, he gave. But he ain't got the balls to do nothing else." He promotedly clotheslined Laura, who fell into Dreamer for a 2 count before exiting the ring. And then he would team up again. Then his downfall started, of course, with the independent circuit, where he was wrestling and booked, of course, to face Jim Neidhart, who was also got drug problems. And around the same time, such things pretended the snake was a penis, stroking it like it was masturbating, and attempting to kiss the snake with his tongue. The show's promoter sent King Kong Bundy and Yokozuna, who was supposed to compete in the other main event, to the ring and made the main event a tag match between Roberts teaming with Yokozuna against Bundy and Neidhart. Roberts was also drunk and could not stand up and took the fall in the match after Bundy squashed the pin. He also got into some serious trouble in the UK. So in 2001, Roberts moved to the United Kingdom and was in All-Star Wrestling. It was noted, of course, as Roberts left the snake in the room and the snake died. Moss regained the title in Ashford, Kent, and throughout 2002, Roberts started his own wrestling promotion in the UK called Real Stars of Wrestling and ran the events headlined by Roberts and the Honky Tonk Man. Roberts made his final British appearance, and then, of course, he moved back to the United States. He's also appeared at Booker T's Houston-based Pro Wrestling Alliance and so forth. And then he lost to, of course, Scott Hall in some other wrestling promotions. He carried on wrestling around different circuits like Jim Ross's circuit. Also went into pro wrestling and so forth. And then, of course, as we know, he was going up to retirement. He showed up in Total Non-Stop Action Wrestling, which of course is TNA. And then he had his second run, then again in WWE. And around that time in WWE, he came to warn Randy Orton about facing The Undertaker. And Randy Orton, of course, arcade Jake the Snake to start Orton's angle of the Legend Killer. Roberts announced his desire in 2013 to appear in the 2014 Royal Rumble, but he showed up on a house show, which was the old school of Raw, and he put a snake on Dean Ambrose. And then in 2014, of course, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame by Diamond Dallas Page. And it was a great time to see that. He's now, of course, in AEW as a wrestling manager and so forth. But as we know with Jake Grump, he went down some dark circles, didn't he, after wrestling? And the drugs started, the alcoholism, him not wanting to be. How do you see that from being a wrestling career to then getting more heavy into the drugs and the alcohol and tarnishing his career, and now he's at home hitting the drugs, and it's cocaine, it's vodka and different drugs, the uppers, the downers, and all the rest that he's taking? How do you think that career's gone from being that megastar to then trying to play with a snake and masturbate a snake in the ring, and the other stuff that he was pulling, and how he was talking to people and under the influence of drugs and alcohol all the time?
Well, I mean, there's no, you can't sit and make excuses for somebody. I mean, I don't know where his mind was at. I don't know what was influencing him, to go backwards. I mean, you're away from it. But then again, addictions and things of that nature have a very strong appeal. They have a very strong lure, and once you get away from them, it's pretty much a lifelong fight to stay away from them. And if you ever let your guard down, or you ever, it don't
Yeah.
take much. It don't take much, and you're right back into it.
Yeah, it's crazy. But what we're going to do, we're just going to take a break for a minute, and we'll be back.
'Cause I got to scoot.
Yeah, so it's a shame to see what happened, but thankfully DDP got in touch with Jake and got him into DDP yoga and started learning him how to eat healthy, showing him there's a different side to life. And the only reason, of course, Jake got inducted into the Hall of Fame Whereas he did clean his life up and got off to the drugs, the alcohol, and he's been clean and sober since. And
Yeah.
it's a great story by watching the resurrection of Jake the Snake and seeing how he's come around. And of course, he does also a little bit of work on his social media, which of course is Tales from the Pit, and he talks. He's also been doing a lot of stand-up work and going all over the place. But he really needed the main thing with Jake at the moment. Of course, we know he's got emphysema and he's really struggling, and that's why, of course, sometimes you'll see him with the face mask on. But he lost a lot of weight. He's put a little bit on, but then you look at the other stuff that he's gone through. He went through muscular cancer, which was in the knee. He also had to have, of course, his shoulder corrected and different things. But now, of course, Jake has been inducted into the Hall of Fame. He's also got his life back on track as he's back with his kids. And he's also remarried to Cheryl Roberts. And he's really living the life now, Grump. Considering how his
Yeah.
career went, he should have been a main star champion, like we say. And it was a shame to see the hurdles that he went through of the drugs and the alcohol, and seeing how his career at the end
Yeah.
was not the best of his career and not the way he wanted to be. But of course, when you're in the midst of drugs and alcohol, you do weird things.
Yeah.
But thankfully, by the grace of God and by the grace, of course, of DDP, he's back normal. And I'm glad I didn't have to read in a newspaper article or on the websites there's Jake died of alcohol or drugs like many other wrestlers have
Yeah.
died from it. Shame. And DDP does a lot. And you know something? He also did it for Scott Hall. And it's been 3 years today. So we are, of course, the 14th of March. And it's 3 years
Yeah.
today. Sadly, Scott Hall passed away and was also a friend of Jake the Snake's. And we've lost too many legends. And Jake is a true legend, great wrestler, great mic worker. Should have been a world champion, as we said, but well done to the Hall of Fame. Well done for his work that he's now doing with the younger talent in AEW, and carry on doing the work, because you've only got to look at some of the names that he helped. The Undertaker. He helped Diamond Dallas Page, Stone Cold Steve Austin, just to name a few. Lance Archer in AEW. He's really helped these superstars and shown them how to work the mic. Doing this periodic wrestling of taking your time. You don't need to keep hitting finisher after finisher after finisher. That one finisher should be the end of the match. And you see it today. There's a lot of people try to be Jake in the ring, or they try and bring Jake into the promos. And Jake's career has lasted forever. And it's a lasting impression now on the new talent wrestling where they are. Of course, we have been smoked beyond the mat, and we've been talking about the legend and Hall of Famer that is Jake the Snake Roberts. And catch us next time, because me and Grumpy are going to start going down the road and deep diving into, of course, Black African American wrestlers. And we're going to be talking about them and the struggles there's a lot of the wrestlers had, like, of course, Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, and different ones, and also, of course, Eddie Long, notable manager. And we're going to go down that route and start talking about the history, of course, of African American wrestlers. And there's some great wrestlers like Junkyard Dog, of course, Tony Atlas, Rocky, like I said, and of course Farouk or Ron Simmons, and different ones. And around the time, of course, of very first seeing a black wrestler win the tag team championships for the very first time, and then of course seeing Ron Simmons win, of course, the heavyweight title and being the first heavyweight champion, of course, being black. So we're going to be talking about that, and then we're going to do some women wrestlers, and we'll go on about Mae Young. We'll go on about, of course, Moolah, and probably lead into Cheryl. Not Cheryl, sorry, Sensational Sherry. And, of course, going down that route and Alondra Blaze and different ones. But it has been Smoke Beyond the Mat. We hope you've enjoyed. From me, stay smoky, and have a great, great weekend. We hope you enjoy this. Please like and subscribe. We do appreciate it. If you want to come and catch us on a Tuesday night, then come and catch us from 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. And at the moment, until the 30th of March, it's 11 p.m. in England. After the 30th of March, it's going to be back to midnight. We can come and catch us on the Cigar Lounge. We are live, of course, on YouTube, Instagram, and rumble.com. You can also catch us on our Facebook group and also on Spotify. But from me, like I say, have a great weekend. Stay smoky, grumpy. We always, of course, finish off with you, my brother. So go on, my brother.
Hey, I love you. Jesus loves you. But if he's not driving the bus, pull over. Let him have the steering wheel. He drives better than we do. Until you see me next time, love you. Peace out.
Let's get ready to rumble. Smoke fills the air, the wrestlers roar. It's smoke beyond the mat, where legends go to war. From the ring to the mic, the stories unfold of triumphs and tears, tales yet untold.